Good day and welcome to the Dallas School District online video training. I'm Garrett Rain, owner of Rain Public Planning, your district safety and security provider. As you watch this video, please feel free to post your questions in the video comments area below. Your comments aid the Dallas School District in enhancing your safety and security training experience, particularly in the future videos that are provided. And today, we're going to You've got a clue what we're talking about today, don't you? It might be up on the screen. Radio use and etiquette. So let's jump in and start beginning our training time, if you would please. So we've got some slides. We're going to talk about radio use and etiquette this morning. And some folks might be saying, why in the world do we need a video training on something like this? A radio is a very simple thing to use. Well, the radio may be simple to use, but its use is a lot more complex than we often think. And we're going to look through some high-level areas where there's often areas of confusion, breakdowns, and just problems. And we're going to try to work through those so that we won't have those issues, breakdowns, and problems. So, why are we here? We're going to look at the basic use and etiquette of a two-way radio. And I've got a couple of samples here just to show sort of some things on the screen. Like, here's a ham-ish kind of radio. It's obviously a little bit more complex than some of the others, so we'll look about that as a prop. We could have maybe a more industrial base Motorola radio, but very functional, but not very simple. There's not a lot of controls that are on there. And we're not going to spend a ton of time talking about the controls. We'll talk about that in a moment. Or you could be just using the little simple ones you could buy at Walmart or wherever, right? That you might be using for recess or at various schools and places that may do those things. But we're going to talk about the basic use of those radios. But there's actually going to be two training segments. This one, the basic etiquette and use one, which where we're going to talk about theory and practice. And then there's going to be a Dallas School District provided one where it discusses how do you use your radio, particularly like how do you turn scan on, how do you change the channels, those kinds of things, right? I don't have your radio, and I'm not an expert on your radio. So someone from your district who has a radio and is an expert on your radio will provide that kind of training. So let's just jump in. Basic radio function. So we're going to see we have three segments in our training today. This is the first of three. Now, how to transmit. Now, you would think, well, it's just really simple. You just transmit. Well, as we discussed in the opening and the beginning, things are a little bit more complicated than we might think. One of the first things we want to do before we decide to pick up the radio and pushing the button or any buttons and hopefully transmitting if we're pushing the right button is think, then transmit. The goal for our communication is compact, precise messages. And there's a joke that I sometimes like to use. Mark Twain was attributed to have said one time, I would have written you a shorter letter if I had more time. To be concise takes thought and effort. So before we just start pushing the button on the radio and start talking, more often blathering, it may be a really good idea for us to think first about what we want to say, how we could make this message compact and precise before we push the button. And there's a sort of a mechanism that's important for us to look at, and it's press, hold, wait, talk, release. Now I'm going to use this radio. I'll change the screen again so you can get maybe a better picture for it. Most radios have this little button along the side, and you may be able to see a little bit. It even has some letters on it, PTT, press to talk, right? And whether it's this radio or this radio, this one just has three little lines over there. They're always on what would be the index finger side from the right hand. Yes, sorry, left-handers. But then for the left-handers, you can use your thumb, right? The button is over here as well. It's always in that same kind of place. So when we're using the radio, we want to press in on the button, hold it. So often we press it in, activate it, and then our thumb gets weak and it pops off, and now we stop transmitting, all right? And we think we are, and we're not. So press, hold, wait, because there needs to be a little bit of time to take place from the time you push the button to by the time the radio signal comes out of the antenna, and especially if you're hitting a repeater, for that repeater to pick up the signal and then start rebroadcasting the signal to the other radios. So you need a short pause in that time. Some digital systems will also give you an acceptance tone, a happy beep, when you push the push to talk button. That's telling you, hey, you've got the comm. You're really on the air, right? And some of them will give you an unhappy multiple beep, 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 beep kind of sound that will tell you, sorry, you're pushing to transmit, but there's already somebody on the radio and you're trying to step on top of their radio traffic, and we're not going to let you. You have to wait until your turn. Whether it's an analog system that just lets you push the button or a digital system that you push the button and it yaks at you because you really don't have the channel, we need to be cognizant that only one person can ever really be functionally transmitting at a time. So it's take turns, right? So press, hold, wait, talk, give your message, and then after you're done, release in that order. All right, let's go back to our slides if we could, please. All right, we already talked about the press to talk or transmit button. Let's talk about position and pace in our communication. There's mistakes that can be made in the use of the radio. Some problems is that sometimes people want to try to talk to the radio when it's far away from their mouth. It doesn't work so much. The opposite extreme is almost as bad. Sometimes it's even worse. You eat the mic. You have your face right up against the radio, and the sound is terrible. The people on the other end have a difficult time understanding what you're trying to say. You want to try to keep the mic. See if I can show it on this side. Yeah, it looks sort of better. Where your index finger on your nose, about 2 to 3 inches away. It's also important, as we'll see in the slide, I wanted to just point on to that fact. You're going to want to talk into the small hole on the radio. It's a little bit hard. You might be able to see it on this screen. But there's a little hole right there. Yep, you can see it a little bit. And even there's a little word that says mic above it. That's where the sound has to go in. Right there. Look on your radio to try to find that same marking. And most of them have that kind of a marking on the radio. We already talked about not eating the mic. And you want to, if possible, it's good to try to talk across the mic and not necessarily directly squarely into the mic. Some consonants like P's and T's and other ones come out, have a much higher sound and volume level than other ones do. And just like when our breath comes out of our mouth when we speak, that air hitting the microphone can create sound. So if we're talking more across the microphone than dead square right into it, we often get a better audio signal coming out on the other end, right? We also want to use a conversational volume. We don't want to whisper, nor do we need to yell. We just need to talk at a calm tone like we normally should do in conversation. Yep, I just said that. Don't yell. Let's talk about tone and mood for a moment. It's easy for us in an emergency to get excited. We need to, remember we talked about before you transmit, think, stop, think before you transmit. Another part of that is deep breath, calm down for a second, think about what I'm going to say, speak clearly and calmly. Fear, anger, and frustration are contagious. So if we start getting snarky on the radio, it comes through loud and clear, and it then adds to the negative tone. If we're using a radio in emergency, which you may be doing in an exercise sometime, it's easy for there to be anxiousness and frustration involved. We do not need to be adding more anger, fear, and frustration to a situation where we're trying to reclaim the chaos and create calm. So start with that, creating calm piece on the radio too. Well, it's important to be ready. For a radio to work, they need electricity. To have electricity, they need to be charged. Do you know what you also need to have for your radio to work? You need your radio. If we forget it, even if it's charged, it doesn't do us any good. Let's also think about using a radio in loud environments. In the school setting, I'm sure you don't have any loud environments. I'm sure the cafeteria is perfectly quiet. The gymnasium, that's probably another really quiet place. The auditorium, when people are coming in and going out. In any noisy environment, even if you have the radio all turned up to maximum, you may not be able to hear it. Running the radio at maximum volume also creates other problems if there are other people anywhere near you who are also using a radio and they have theirs set to maximum volume. And then when the radio goes off, you get this echo thing. And while you're trying to transmit, you're hearing your own voice transmit and it's looping back around. You lose your concentration. That creates problems as well. So there are some items, if you need to work in a loud environment, having an earpiece, and I'll show some pictures of these examples. Yours would be different, okay? Or a lapel mic. You know how some shirts have like this lapel? You think about police or firemen, and they have that lapel across the top where the epaulets go, all right? It is cosmetic, but the police and fire have found it is also very useful to clip your lapel mic over there because it actually provides a good location for you to hear and a good position for you to talk and transmit because now you're talking across the mic and your position of the mic in relation to your mouth is very well suited for effective radio communication. Here's some examples of some that you can see. The Secret Service-like kind of earpiece. They then have a separate microphone that you end up maybe putting on your lapel, or those folks have a really special one with a switch that's on their, it's a bottom of their cuff. So they're talking to their hand, all right? But those help a lot in a very loud environment. Another more simple solution is the lapel mic. The problem with using that one is that you still have to be cognizant of your volume. This also goes to the type of radio traffic that you're sending and receiving. If there's ever an opportunity that there would be sensitive information or information like, hey, we can't find Susie Smith, and the radios are broadcasting that out and loud, and the parents of Susie Smith are nearby, they're not going to be very happy. So pay attention to the other folks overhearing some maybe sensitive radio traffic. Receiving a call and a radio, calling and receiving a radio call. Let's talk about that practice of how you call people and how you receive a call and what happens if they don't answer. All right, let's work through that for a few moments, please. So we're going to use, and I would recommend very strongly that you use a from-to radio calling format where you say who you are and then say who you're calling. The advantages of using a from-to format is that when transmission is made on the radio, someone will hear someone talking. They may or may not hear that it is Garrett calling Bob. All right? There might be even a Bob out there watching this right now. But they will hear the Bob part. If we start with Bob from Garrett, they might not have heard it at all because it didn't get, because as soon as we hear our name, we perk up, right? And we pay attention. So you want to say who you are and then who you're calling. Another question presents is that especially in some sort of an exercise drill or emergency situation or setting, should you use your name to name, or should you use position to position? And you may need to seek some direction from your incident command and in the event on whether or not we're going to use name-to-name communication or position-to-position. But I would think that in many cases, position-to-position is probably going to be more effective. Post 2 to post 3. Post 3 responds. Post 3, go ahead, post 2. All right? Because you may not know the name of every person who's in the organizational structure within which you are working. So probably position is probably more often the better call, name to call, and not call by name, if that made sense. So someone calls you. So it is now Bob calling Garrett. The answer is Garrett here, copy. Garrett here. And then, or if they actually just give you a bit of information and you receive that information, the answer is copy. Often when we're watching TV shows, and you know how accurate police and fire and all that kind of stuff is on TV, right? You'll hear people, or military, right? Copy that, copy that. Did you ever watch Star Wars with the droids and they're going Roger, Roger? Copy that is just as redundant as sitting around going Roger, Roger all the time. Because that doesn't add anything to the communication. It just takes time and energy and eats up frequency, our time on the channel, right? When you want to confirm that you received the message, copy is clear. And that's what is best practice. We also don't use 10 codes. People in police and fire years ago, 10-4, 10-20, all that kind of stuff. The problem is that not every agency's codes all meant the same thing, and we don't always remember what all the codes are. So all those rules are out the board now. Even police and fire are not using 10 codes. They use plain language. I am on scene. Right? Where is your location instead of 10-20? Copy instead of 10-4. Right? Plain language. But what happens if the person you're calling doesn't answer? That's so frustrating, isn't it? Well, you can call a second time. Now, if they don't respond, well, then your next option is, if it's an urgent item, who's their boss? What position is above the position you were calling? Then contact the boss. If it's a less urgent situation, you can ask folks to say, does anyone have eyes on post 2? If so, would you have him call post 4, please? Right? And then, of course, one of those folks who had eyes on the person who's at post 2 would say, I have post 2. I will relay the message. Right? Now, what happens if you're on the other end and you hear your radio go off? You heard them call you the first time. You heard them call you the second time, but you're on a phone call or there's someone talking to you and it's an urgent matter and you can't disengage that whole conversation right now. What you can do is you just pick up the radio quickly and say, post 2, stand by. Right? Now they know that you were trying to reach them and that they will get back to you when they're free. Let's talk a little bit more about radio etiquette, if we could, please. There is what we would call in the radio world the 8-second rule. No radio message should be longer than 8 seconds. Do this, we're not going to do it in the training, but count slowly to 8 seconds and see how long that is. That's actually quite a bit longer period of time than we would think of. We want our radio traffic to be compact and precise. Remember, that was our goal? Compact and concise. When we are talking and pushing and holding the microphone, we're holding the channel and no one else can have it. And we are doing that. If we do it more than 8 seconds, we've got a problem. The communication should most often be much shorter than that. But what do you do then if you've got something complex that you need to discuss that it's certainly going to take more than 8 seconds? Well, we radio the person that we need to speak to, and we request that we could speak to them by phone. Either they give us their number, we give them their phone number, and we talk by phone. Another option is that we can request that the other person get off the channel that we're on, and we'll talk about how to change channels in just a moment, and go to a little used what's called TAC channel. In the police, fire, emergency services world, these are channels that are reserved for special functions and use, and not only the group and team that's really working on that special function and use are listening to that channel, and they're normally free for longer-winded conversations. So those are the two options. The easiest one probably for you folks to do is to call them by cell phone. Get a hold of them on the radio first, so they know that they should be receiving a call and they won't ignore it thinking it's a telemarketer. And you then, folks, can work out your conversation on a device that's intended for conversations, a cell phone, more of a back and forth, long-term conversation, and the radio for broadcast information, right? And situational awareness information. Let's talk about switching channels, because there are various times you may need to get off the channel, the home channel you've been assigned to, and go to another channel. Let's work through the steps of what you do to switch channels. One, you need to request switch with the other party. You contact the other party by radio, all right? Post 2 to post 3. Can we go to TAC 1? Right? We're requesting a switch. Then, once you folks have arranged for that, yep, I can switch to TAC 1. You're going to notify your boss. Post 1 to post commander. Post 1 and 2 are going to be on TAC 1. So they need to get a hold of you, and they know where they are, because once you leave that channel, you may not be able to hear any of the other radio traffic for the assignment in which you are working and functioning, right? So there is a risk in this. When you get on the channel you've decided to jump to, in our example, TAC 1, you just don't jump on and start talking. Because guess what? You weren't listening to that traffic, and there might be an ongoing conversation already on that channel. And you need to wait about 6 seconds to see, is the channel really free before I jump on and have this detailed conversation and interrupt somebody else's conversation. Sense etiquette. You call, you discuss your issue. Well, now what are you going to do? You're going to return to the channel you left, right? Go back to your home channel. And then you're going to notify your boss or incident command, we're back. So they know that you're available to receive radio traffic, and they don't have to go looking for you elsewhere. And if there's anything new and breaking, then it would be good for the boss or incident command to tell you, oh, by the way, this is something that you need to know that took place while you were off channel, right? So that you can be abreast to the situation that has developed in the time you were working on that other issue or problem. Let's talk about phonetics. Ever hear like Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, X-Ray, Zulu? There are times to use it and times to not. You use those phonetics when you are in a situation where it's clear that the person on the other end did not understand what you were saying, what this word was you were trying to give them, like the spelling of a name. That's often where it breaks down. You can also use those phonetics when you're quite confident that if I just say this name, they're not going to get it right. And then you break out the phonetics. But you don't break out phonetics unless you need to, because it takes more time. And again, we wanted our conversation to be concise and clear, and we're using a party line system. Everybody's listening, at least who's ever on that radio channel. So we don't want to do it when we don't need to. I'm going to show you on the screen a list of the approved phonetics. We just don't make up, zebra, yellow, fire hydrant, right? We don't make up stuff. There's an approved list. This actually started more in for international telecommunications, airports, pilots. So this is on the screen now. If you'd like to look at it and practice it, you could pause this video. You can look it up yourself and make sure it's the same list, but this is the one I learned in state police in 1988. All right. But so there's our list. Radio use recap. The radio basics overview. As we can see, the use of a radio is really a learned skill. And just like every other learned skill, it's a perishable skill. So therefore, if part of our job is the likelihood and necessity to use a radio, we need to find opportunities to routinely practice the use of the radio. If we're not efficient in the use of the radio when things are calm in normal daily life, it's going to be a whole lot more difficult for us to be efficient in the use of the radio in an emergency event. So I'd very much encourage you to consider and plan for how you're going to practice your radio skills. As we know, there's a supplement to this training where you will receive and see additional information on how to specifically utilize the Dallas School District radio. Just want to thank you so very much for your time and attention in this. And I thank you for taking part of this online video training. We hope you found this time to be effective and efficient. And may you and yours be safe and well. And we will see you in another video. Goodbye.